Hi there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be a wrap-up of my past week or so in reading. The first thing that I picked up last week was Zahra's Paradise. This is by an author and an artist who use pseudonyms. They go by Amir and Khalil. This is a fictionalized retelling of a student who went missing during the 2009 Iranian political protests. It is narrated by that missing person's brother, and it's the story of him and his mother looking for their lost son brother, and the processes that they go through trying to find an answer. Is he in prison? Is he in hospital? Is he dead? And if he's dead, can they get the body back? It is not a character piece, it is very much about their quest to get answers. And it's quite a powerful read in that, but if you were looking for character connections, that's not what you're going to get here. The art style is a very traditional black and white style, so not super busy, but also not stripped down, which is actually my favorite style of black and white comic art, so I quite liked that. The book ends in a, I think, spectacularly moving way in that it lists off the names of more than 16,000 people who have gone missing over the past few decades for political reasons in Iran, which is an impressive note to end on. The one complaint that I would have about this is about the font. I really didn't like the lettering in here. It was distracting and almost difficult to read. Next up, I read a novella from McClellan's Powder Mage series. This is Return to Honor, which is set between the first and third books in the trilogy. It is about the character Flora, who is one of the officers and mages. It's a flintlock fantasy series with a sort of pseudo-French Revolution setting. The main character in this is searching for someone who was part of a group that committed a political killing, and she is looking for them. I can't say too much about this because it is set after the first book. It would spoil an event that happens in the first one. It was, to be honest, not as good as the base series. I wasn't disappointed that I read it because it is quite short, but it was a bit of a letdown. There wasn't much to it, to be honest. Next up, I read Goodbye Things by Fumio Sasaki, which is yet another book about clearing out. The author of this is a complete, like a pure minimalist. He is a person who only owns one towel and uses it for both bathing and washing his dishes. He's hardcore. But this is not presented as try to be like him. It's presented as here's how you can strip things down and let things go in a more general way. So I actually liked that a little bit more than I've liked some of the other cleaning books that I've talked about lately. I don't know why I'm reading all these cleaning books, because I'm not really looking to clean. In any case, he starts the book out with a series of photos of homes of minimalists that are not necessarily as minimalistic as he is, and also then who maybe couldn't be as minimalistic as he is because he's a single guy living alone in a small apartment, and he shows some houses of people who are families of four, larger spaces, things like that. So that was interesting. His actual points, I think, could be summed up in the list that he gives near the end of the book, and the rest of it is just him musing on his journey. He's a little bit obsessed with Steve Jobs and Apple products, which I could have done without. I'm fairly neutral on that, but I know some people either love or hate the kind of Apple family of products, so depending on how you feel about that, that might make you want to read that more or not want to touch it at all. Because yeah, if you're one of the people who hates Apple products, you probably don't want to read this because the author is a big fan and talks about that a lot. And then March Mystery Madness started, so I picked up the first in my stack of mysteries, which was Sheena Kamal's The Lost Ones, which starts out as a beautifully atmospheric, kind of depressing thriller set in the underbelly of Vancouver's homeless communities, and then suddenly turns into a ridiculous action piece and just becomes completely unrealistic and ridiculous. So I didn't really know what to make of this, because in general I like a combination of social commentary and action in general, but this merged them in such a way that it was just really bizarre, because the book starts out with this very gritty realism, and then it suddenly becomes this over-the-top ridiculousness. I had to step back and say, what is happening here? The main character is a woman who works for a private investigator, and she is basically homeless. She lives in the basement of the building where the office is, and she gets a call and finds out that the daughter that she gave away for adoption 15 years before has been kidnapped. And it goes through a lot of really harsh things because she was raped and left for dead, and the daughter is a product of that. The adoptive parents have come to her because the police aren't paying attention, and she's making the point that it's because they don't pay attention to when Aboriginal women and girls go missing, and there's this whole discussion of class and race and grittiness, and then it just goes off the rails, and she's jumping off buildings and fighting people on beaches, and it's crazy. So I didn't know what to make of this. It's definitely interesting. I really liked the atmosphere and the way you could feel the Vancouver weather, so I really enjoyed that first part at the beginning. And as I said, I like action pieces, but the two bits never 100% came together for me, so I really felt conflicted about that, because I liked a lot of it, but it just was weird together. The package didn't work for me. Next up, I picked up another mystery, and that was Idle Threats by Stephanie Gayle. This is the first book in her Thomas Lynch series, which is about a detective from New York City who more or less is forced to quit his job in New York after his partner dies on the job, and moves to a small town where he becomes chief of police. He has a kind of ill-advised love affair in a semi-public area and witnesses what may be the last sighting, aside from her murderer, of a teenage girl who is later found dead. And because he's closeted at work, he doesn't share that information, and so we get into the whole, they're investigating this, but he's also trying to keep his private life away from his coworkers. And this is set in 1997. It's probably around the same year as, if you watched Homicide: Life on the Street, there was a subplot in, I don't remember which season it was, one of the later seasons, where Bayless, the bisexual character, gets outed and there's drama in the police precinct. And I think this character is trying to avoid that kind of thing while still investigating this case. As a setup, I wasn't a huge fan of this. It didn't 100% work for me. Some of it was a little silly. I felt like some of it stretched belief, not in the way that this did. It didn't go off the rails that way, but I felt a bit like the author was going through a checkbox of, like, the wacky small town police officers don't know how to go about a crime scene without ruining it. I think one of the things that didn't work for me is that the main character is so concerned about being outed at work, but he constantly gets himself into situations where he's trying to flirt with people or hook up with people in situations where they could easily out him. I didn't find that to be super realistic. I realized that that's in there because she wanted to add drama, but it didn't completely work for me. Now, that said, this book is just the setup, so that will presumably not continue in the rest of the series, and I did enjoy the way the main mystery played out, so I did put the second one in the series on hold at the library, and we'll see how that goes. And after that, I thought I didn't want to get sick of mysteries, so I picked up a non-mystery. So I picked up Down and Across by Arvin Ahmadi. This is a recent young adult release, which I saw, I think it was in the Washington Post. They described this as a love song to the DC area. So I was curious to pick this up because in that review they talk about this character biking around Georgetown. I lived in the DC area for a couple of years, just across the river in Roslyn, and I used to walk my dog across the Key Bridge and around Georgetown almost every day. So I was enthused to read this, even though it sounded like it probably wasn't going to be my thing overall. It's about a 16-year-old whose parents go off to Iran for a month, and so he quits his internship in Philadelphia and runs away to DC to meet a random professor at Georgetown and get a job and meet a manic pixie dream girl. This book did one of those things that I complain about sometimes, in that it comments on the cliche that it's using. So in this, the girl who is the manic pixie dream girl comments on that, but that doesn't make her less of a manic pixie dream girl. She still is. It's still ridiculous and cliche. So I was not a fan of that, and there are a lot of very unrealistic, ridiculous things. Like, the main character in this is 16, and he is meeting all these older women who are all falling for him. He's, having this adventure where he can, get inside all kinds of bars, and I don't know, it just all struck me as kind of ridiculous. Now, I mean, this is a young adult book. I'm not the target market for this, and I think if you were a teenager and you just wanted to read a kind of wish fulfillment fantasy that imagines that you can get away with this kind of thing, maybe this would be a lot of fun, and maybe if you don't hate the manic pixie dream girl cliche as much as I do, this might be a lot of fun. Especially if I think a lot of that style of story tends to be set in either New York or Los Angeles, and it tends to be a Anglo character in his early 20s, whereas this is a Persian character in his mid-teens, and it's DC. So if you do like that kind of cliche, and I mean, we all have cliches that we like, so fair enough, then this might be right up your alley. A lot of it I just thought was ridiculous. It also made me feel old because I spent a lot of time saying this kid needs to be grounded. He's so irresponsible. Why would his parents leave him alone for a month? Anyway. But anyway, it was a quick read anyway, so can't complain too much. In any case, I'm probably going to spend the rest of the month reading nothing but mysteries, so we'll see how that goes. I hope your week has been going well, and that's it for now. Ciao.